Hi, this is our week 6 intro video. The topic this week is learning from failure. And before we look at what we have coming up this week, just a quick look back on last week. Our focus was servant leadership traits, especially the trait of foresight. We didn't discuss mentoring much, which was also on my personal agenda to talk about, but the class's interest areas seem to be more on the topic of intuition, awareness, and foresight, so we really focused on that. What we did learn from studying those traits is that servant leadership focuses on forming authentic relationships, and mentoring is a way of doing that. And so that is why mentoring is really a tool that is effectively used by servant leaders. Last week we launched our crowdfunding project, and I have to say things are off to a good start. We've raised $100 so far. Today is Saturday. Actually, I'm videoing or recording this a bit earlier because I'm going out of town tomorrow. But today we started sharing via social media. So I encourage you to keep that up. Every day try to post the link to our campaign page on various social media forums. I only have a Facebook account. I don't really use Twitter and Instagram. Google, I think Google Plus was one of the other social media buttons on the campaign site. So if you utilize those forms of social media, I really encourage you to please share using those, because the more different ways we do share it, the more people it's going to reach. And then also make sure that you are doing something at least every other day to update the campaign site, whether it's adding a photo or we had talked about that pitch video, and at least the last time I had checked the campaign site there wasn't a pitch video yet, but different links to websites that speak to our cause. These are all ways that it's going to increase the go-go factor and draw people back to the campaign site another time. So let's say someone visited it once just to check it out. Maybe they shared, but they didn't make a contribution. Well, if we do some updates and then share again, saying, hey, we've done these updates, check out our new pitch video or whatever, then people will come back and perhaps contribute again or share again. Otherwise, things are going really well, and I hope that you are as happy with how our crowdfunding project is going as I am. Because this is the first time I've actually ever done the crowdfunding as a class service project, and I know that it's definitely something that I would like to continue to do with classes in the future. Alright, so this week, got a lot of stuff going on this week because this is the last half of the class, and so things are kind of coming to a crescendo here. The first thing is to pay attention that we have reflective journal paper number 3 is due on Monday at midnight. Our crowdfunding project continues, and that is concluding on Friday, August 7th. And then you should have done some reading over this last week to prepare for discussing the topic of learning from failure. We already heard from Luigi, I believe it was, that something that stood out for him in Greenleaf's The Leader as Servant was his discussion of how leaders turn obstacles and failures into opportunities for growth. And so we've already read Greenleaf's take on failure and leadership. And now we're going to look at a couple of other perspectives. In Kress, that's the Learning Through Serving book, in Chapter 9, that looks at typical roadblocks and the dynamics behind those roadblocks, why those happen, and and they're typical roadblocks for service learning experiences. Loeb, Chapter 10 through 12, and specifically Chapter 11 talks about coping with burnout, and this is really a good chapter for anyone to read, because burnout is something that we all experience. It is very pervasive, that's the word I'm looking for, pervasive in our culture, and it's something that I've heard from everybody in this class, including those who withdrew from this class, that burnout is something they're experiencing and can be almost suffocating to some people, and so Loeb gives some really good insight through storytelling on how to cope with that. Palmer, that's that small pink book, Let Your Life Speak. We're reading, you should have read chapters 3 and 4, and then Warren, Day 35. Those, well, the Palmer chapters there is discussion of failure or obstacles in life, specifically with depression and coping with that, which is a frequent symptom of burnout, and obviously situational depression can happen if you really were invested in a project and something went wrong, and that is a very common response that people have, is depression. So Palmer talks a bit about how he has dealt with depression in his own life, and then Warren, Day 35, that is his take on failure and how we're not perfect, we're human, and how to look at that in a positive light. So something really important to think about, because we live in a very competitive society. That's something that keeps coming up in our conversations, and so many times failure, or even if things just don't go quite the way we had hoped or anticipated, how there can be this tendency to see it as a negative, as a place to stop and end at, instead of seeing it as a learning opportunity, opportunity for growth and moving forward in positive directions. And so that's, in a nutshell, what all of these readings are attempting to do. I'm sorry if my video keeps jerking around. I keep seeing that. I have my pillow situated, or my laptop situated on a pillow on my lap here, and it seems to be bouncing a bit. Alright, so that's this week. Oh, and then you should have read, or not read, viewed, there's a video posted on Moodle under week 6. It's called Failure Video, and this is a really great, it's a TED Talk by 2 college students who did a major service project that spanned a number of years, that in many ways they had begun working on back when they were in high school, and and how they encountered some major roadblocks, and things went haywire very quickly after they'd put in enormous amounts of work and people had invested enormous amounts of money in their project, and how they dealt with that. So I'd really encourage you to take some time to look at that if you haven't had a chance yet. It puts things in perspective, let's just put it that way. Alright, so looking ahead, week 7 is our final week. That's next week. So this week you should be doing pre-reading to prepare for our final week. The pre-reading you're doing is Kress chapters 10 and 11, and Palmer chapters 5 and 6. And then there's some major things that you need to be thinking about now that are due in week 7, that it's good to think about now so that they don't sneak up and bite you come week 7. The first thing is that your service log will be due on Friday, August 14th. And this is that chart that I asked you to print off during week 1 so that you could keep track of your 8 instances of service. Each instance was to be a minimum of 1 hour, each instance. And then you were keeping track of those on this log and getting a signature from a community partner representative to verify that you actually participated in the work. That log is due on Friday, August 14th. There's a final integrative presentation, and this is a visual presentation of whatever sort of visual presentation you want to do. It could be a PowerPoint, a video, a visual art piece, a film, whatever. It needs to be visually focused, and it needs to address all of the criteria in the rubric. And the rubric is posted under the assignment submission tab. So where you will upload your presentation on Moodle, that is where the rubric can be found. So if you have any questions about specifically what criteria need to be met through this presentation, take a look at that. You've already started working on this in a way. All those service shots that you've been posting over the weeks, those may be used in the presentation. They should not be the only thing that is in your presentation, though. You need to add more to it. But that was my purpose behind doing those service shots. Besides to be able for me to kind of get an idea of what you were doing, since I was not involved in helping you choose your community partners. It was a way for you to start to gather images for this presentation. And then there's also the final integrative paper. Now this paper is different than the reflective journal papers we have been writing. It's also it's similar in some ways and it's different in some ways. So it's similar in some ways that you are still talking about your service experience. You're talking about the content, the course content that we've discussed and read over the last several weeks. And you're integrating those things together so that you can speak about the new learning that you have experienced through the service learning. So that's where it's the same. Where it's different is that well, if you look at the rubric, that's a good place to start. If you haven't already, the rubric for the final integrative paper is different than the one for the reflective journal papers. There are different criteria that we're looking at. There are a number of criteria that are looking for you to speak about your experience of the culture that you're serving. So that would be the culture of poverty, and talking about your biases, your hidden rules, and how they may differ from other people's hidden rules, the hidden rules of the culture of poverty, and how your perhaps your preconceptions of how poor people have been changed. And there also is a specific criteria that wants you to address how your communication strategies have changed, and you're supposed to demonstrate this by giving examples that happened during your service experience. So take a look at the rubric. Is very very good at explaining what we're looking for. There also is a guideline for the integrative paper, and the way that I use it, or if I were to be writing this paper, is I'd take the guideline and I'd use that as an outline for my paper, and I'd write the paper using the guideline, and then I'd take the rubric and I'd look at my draft of the paper and look at the rubric and make sure that those criteria are addressed in what I've already written. And if something seems to be missing, then I'd insert some more material in wherever it seems to fit best, depending on what you first wrote. So begin working on those two, the final integrative presentation and the final integrative paper, so that it doesn't sneak up and catch you off guard the following week. Oh yes, and the final thing I wanted to say about the final integrative paper is that you'll notice when you're looking at the guidelines that it says that you should refer to your reflective journal papers. And what this means is that you can go back to what you wrote and select sections that maybe as you're looking at that integrative paper guideline, you're like, oh, I should really talk about that new learning that I experienced when I was helping the woman pack her basket with baby items, whatever. Maybe there's some new realization that you came to that you wrote about in a previous reflective journal paper. What you can do is you can refer to that. So you would quote your reflective journal paper that was in as if it were like an article or one of our textbooks. So you'd actually cite yourself in the paper, and then under your bibliography or works cited, however you're supposed to be writing papers for your field, you would list you as the author and refer to your reflective journal paper number 2 or whatever it is, and then you need to make sure that the date of that reflective journal paper is noted in the citation. So just to further clarify, don't think, oh well, I'll just cut and paste a section out, like a page or so out of my reflective journal paper and put it in my final integrative paper. That's what that means. That isn't what that means. It means you can quote yourself, just like you would quote an author out of one of the textbooks. So you can cut and paste, but it would be a smaller section that you would put in quotations and that you would clearly cite in the paper, so that we know, oh shit, this is a reference to something that had been written in a different paper, and not that it's just I'm trying to get this paper done quicker by cutting and pasting a couple of pages, which I've had people do before. They didn't understand, though. After talking to them, they thought that was what was the guidelines we're talking about. So, hope that's clear. If it's not, just throw me a text or an email, and I'll try to explain it further too. I think that is it. Yes, that is. So, yeah, this is we're getting close to the end here. I'm excited to see how this crowdfunding project turns out. I'm really interested in this week's conversation about failure and your perspectives, and hearing some stories about your experiences of failure in the past. I know I've got lots of them to share with you. Sorry, this was starting to fall off of my pillow here. And yeah, I guess that's about it. So, I am going to be out of town from Sunday, Sunday, what is it, August 2nd through Tuesday. Is that August 5th? So I won't be available for immediate response. However, you know that I am really good about responding within 24 hours at the very slowest. So please feel free to text me or send me an email. I will be checking my email at least a couple times a day. And I think that's it. Thanks, and hope you have a good week.